I'll open the town council budget workshop for Thursday, June 2nd. And the roll call shows that all council members are present. And we are going to discuss this evening some new information that our town manager is presenting to us. Some of it based on requests from individual councilors and some of it based on her further work. Then we will go on to discuss the final department budget, which is general government. So with that introduction, we have a lot of paper that just came around.
You do, and it's all dutifully hole punch, so you can put it right in your. So the first item is a revision list. So we've made it almost all the way through the budget. As we go through the budget, you guys bring up points perhaps and life changes. So every time I change the budget after it gets printed, it goes on the revision list. I think the ones to bring to your attention, we've had a resignation in the of the life safety inspector who's retiring after 32 years of service. When we look at bringing a new life safety inspector on, that person is going to need more guidance from the fire department, which means that the whole job is not going to be TIF eligible. So I reorganized that job. It's the exact same purpose. However, 50% of it is in the fire department, 50% is in the TIF. We reviewed the allocations into the TIF and maneuvered the salary distribution around to cover the increase on the fire department side is tempered with a decrease in the town manager's budget and community development budget. So the net of that entire change was a reduction of $4,500 to the net commitment. We got an updated assessment from the city of Bangor for the community connector. And if you recall, that's different than the Black Bear Express. But it looks about $3,300 less than what we had originally budgeted. So the budget has decreased to $3,300. As I talked previously, and also with Council Chair Perry since we last met, we've done some changes to the pay scale that had initially been adopted in, put into the budget. And we brought up some of the lower folks some more because we're already seeing some issues with trying to recruit in and reduce some of the top folks down a little bit to try to make that work. Implemented a little bit differently. The net change there is a reduction of $2,800. We had external consulting budget line. We continue to work on some structuring in that department and have reduced the increase by $8,500. So that budget line is $8,500 less. Public Works General Maintenance, we had a significant increase in the budget for pavement marking services. We got that bid in, as you guys recall. So we were able to drop that budget line by $10,000 to reflect actual costs. So overall, it's $26,000 decrease in the budget just based on life happening since it's been printed. Questions about revision?
Do you know why revenue share was moved?
I do. I had butterfingers and I flipped two numbers, so I went back. I always go back a couple of times because that's such a big number. So we that is 100% of what's projected. Some folks are only doing 15% or so. I'm sorry, 85% or so. We're taking it all.
So beginning of the restructuring, let's say 4531. Is an action? Is it? Are we just talking about?
Theo, we can't hear you.
Thanks, Val. I'm asking about the restructuring of the full-time position, life safety, that resulted in 4531. I didn't quite understand what is this. Just you're also changing where the funds are coming from? Or is there an actual change to the level of the position? Or both?
So I would say both, sort of, kind of.
Definitely, maybe.
Yeah, definitely, maybe. So the restructuring part said, because it is a new life safety person coming in, the fire chief wanted to be able to ensure that that person knew life safety and we're building a program. So it needs to be housed out of the fire department and support the TIF activity, as opposed to before it was housed in the economic development department and supported fire activity. So it is no longer 100% eligible for TIF funds. In order, when I look at that, it shuffled some of my responsibilities, some of Belle's responsibilities, town planner. So we shuffled that money back around to pay for as much as we legitimately could out of the TIF. That's number one. So definitely, yeah.
So we're not spending as much TIF money for life safety, but we're spending more TIF money in some other positions because of that change.
So that's my nodded yes. The other element that we have that we find often is, so we brought somebody who had been in the fire department for a long time, moved into the non-union side, so wasn't governed by the labor contract for several years, many years. So now when I try to pull somebody out of the fire department with new labor contracts, new labor rates, the price for that position has gone up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you're seeing an increase of the price cost of the position in order to move a trained person, semi-trained person out of fire into life safety, still living in fire, but out of fire union and response. But also half of that cost is now borne by the fire department, half is borne by the TIF.
So there's no change to the FTE, it's still one FTE.
It's just one person. One person is leaving. We'll move one person up in fire, which has been done. That's the normal course of filling this position. And we'll backfill the vacancy, becomes a line staff firefighter. That makes sense?
Yes. Thanks.
Information that was requested about salary by position is the next item in our list. I just want to explain that we have many people who are split between multiple departments. Salaries are split. They are recorded once in their primary department. The only exception to that is starred. It's one individual who is shared between community development and the library. The jobs are so different that that person actually has two different pay scales depending on which job they're doing. So I have to account for them twice. I can't, because it really depends on what department they're working for. When you look at the 23 base annual, that is what their wage would be as of July 1, 2022, with any merit adjustment, contractual or promised adjustment as part of a employment agreement. And also if there's a regulatory adjustment that is made prior to, that's your base. And then the other two show what the market adjustment would be that I have proposed. Making sense? Is it the information you were looking for?
Yes, this is helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions on that?
Or
Can I ask question on a week or so ago, you had mentioned that it was for the town planner, in this budget, it was 50%. Which does not equate to what I'm looking at.
So the planner in the original budget was 24 hours of planning, 16 hours of TIF. But this is the whole salary as of July 1, 2022, not split.
So this wasn't 50-50.
No, I'm sorry, it was 50-50 the previous year. We made it 16-24, 16 hours, 24 hours. We've moved it back to 50-50 as part of that reshuffling.
I think one, maybe explain to me if I've missed this, but one additional piece of information that would be interesting to me is, so I see the proposed fiscal year 23 base annual, and I'm curious what, like the last couple of years of salary are and how those, like how does this year's.
So you'd like to see their current salary, last year's.
And the,
Okay, that's gonna take me a little bit more time. That's not a report I can generate off what I have right now, but we can come up with that.
great, thanks.
So I just want to be clear what Sonia asked for. Current salary for the same positions listed. And
So it's the, so what I was hoping to see was, yeah, the current salaries, as in last year's salaries that were in the budget that last year's council passed, as compared with the proposed salaries in this year's budget. That was the side-by-side comparison I was hoping for.
so you want one additional column,
Yes.
which is current salary.
Yeah.
So I can do current salary on a specific date. The budget that was passed would be a general budget that may or may not meet merit raises, and those are not necessarily guaranteed. So I can give you what they're making today. I can give you what they were making on any particular day and time. But to go through and handpick out what was budgeted and why they didn't necessarily get there, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to create too much of a headache. I think a point in time, and perhaps for simplicity, that could be,
Wouldn't current be the most
current,
valuable piece?
current seems reasonable, sure.
I
Yeah,
can do that.
wonderful.
And so what is the second column then? Between plus the market annual?
So the first one is what we would be obligated in because of employment agreements or hire promises that hire in a hire letter, or merit, which there are a few, not a lot of merit, but a few. That is in your base annual wage. And then we're going to talk about a market wage when we talk about, which is the pay scale
I see,
adjustment.
gotcha.
So what you're seeing, what we're seeing in column 2, FY 23 base plus market annual, is a proposed increase in this budget, whereas that first column is, this is what we are contractually obligated to pay folks for 23.
The only addition I would give there are a couple of merit increases that are in there.
Right, so I just wanted to be clear, so just so folks didn't think that that first column is like what the budget's proposing to.
No, the budget is proposing the second column.
Yes, that's what I want to make sure everyone's clear.
Yeah,
Anyone playing at home or?
Second or third, or so not the third column?
so if we're gonna do the second column of numbers.
Yeah.
The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th column in from the left is what's in the budget.
Which is titled
23
23
base,
base plus market annual.
yes.
Okay.
Ready?
Thank you.
So the next one should be potential ARPA uses, which Council Chair Perry asked for last time. This just reiterates what our ARPA allocation is, the amount that we've currently received, the amount that we have encumbered or promised to spend or authorized to spend, the amount that's left. I was asked to identify single purchases that we did not anticipate repeating. The pool gutter, the public safety needs assessment, the public facility repairs, and Councilor Perry also suggested the public safety director's vehicle because the continuation of that structure may or may not live beyond another vehicle. When we adopted that, we said that we would revisit it. We revisited it once to get us to this year, and then I have a 3-year contract with the current public safety director, so we would revisit it after that. So that's what that one is.
And just on the ARPA remaining funds, that's the remaining amount of the 570,000, and we are anticipating another 570,000 in this coming year.
We are, I have been strongly encouraged not to encumber more than we receive because it requires another action in Washington. The next one, I think this is what Leo was asking for. So I laid out the best I could what made up the increase of $983,000. Now it's 983 minus, did you? Where did oh, I already did the revision list. Minus the revisions that you have
The 26,000.
already seen. So this looks at the decision for the mid-year COLA last year, the environmental services coordinator, and the public safety restructuring that you did last year. And then for this year, it has payroll increases, the merit and regulatory increases, and then the market adjustments. Payroll related increases that are related to the current union personnel. The wage and benefit increasing resulting from bargaining. I will just remind you that only one of those contracts is settled. The other one I have budgeted, but it is not settled yet.
So there are two items of payroll and related increases.
Yes.
Union and non.
Yes, I split them.
Yep.
Split them up. The budget increases in the fire department for coverage, I moved that out, and that was because it wasn't specific to a payroll amount. That is an estimate. And we increased it. We probably could have tripled that increase, but it makes sense to be a little bit more moderate in it. And then we looked at the cost drivers in the budget, gasoline and diesel, anticipated fire protection fee increase, the community connector assessment, the recycling processing fee. If you recall, that's one that we were paying the fee anyway, we just hadn't budgeted for it. Public works outside contractors, IT outside contractor increase, assessing services contractor, miscellaneous contract and professional services, training, which I've mentioned several times in the budget process and documents. We've really, for both expectations or perceived expectations around DEI and other best practices, along with having new employees, is driving up our personnel costs. So across all departments, that was about $20,000. And then another 12,000 for increases in electricity, natural gas, and propane. And then increased service level with the Parks and Rec renting indoor facility, and the additional money for public health and community support in the town manager's budget. So that it was all but about 66,000, which is too small to kind of pick out.
Any questions on that?
That first one that's post-budget adoption expenses. Meaning this happened already?
It happened after the FY 22 budget was adopted and committed. Council made budget adjustments.
So when the budget was approved last year, that increase wasn't in it.
No,
And so it's now in this one.
yes,
And we had a 7-8% increase in last year's budget, but it didn't have that.
No.
All right, thank you. Thank you for pulling this together.
Read you want?
I have a few more.
We got lots more paper.
All right, so I'm gonna go to the one I just passed out, which is the most recent calculation. Just so this represents the revision list. I have not made the changes with ARPA yet in the tax calculation. That's something that, if that meets with your approval, I'll go ahead and pull that into its own budget. Okay.
The school rate reflects the increase that was made at the budget meeting. Very interesting meeting. No, anybody else went to it. They increased a position, a 50% position to full-time. The audience, the voting members did, community members did, after the superintendent, the school committee chair, and the high school principal said, we don't need that. The public wanted it. So
I thought
we-
they had extra money to do that, though. I thought that they didn't have to raise their,
Define extra money.
they
in
have,
the bank.
they have $100,000 in their professional salary line, and another $100,000 in their special education salary line for unanticipated changes in staffing right here. They have some extra money.
Which I think even just the special ed line, I know
Yep.
that can
Absolutely.
change and pretty quickly and pretty severely, so. That's interesting. Missed it.
I'm gonna come back to the town, because that's what I.
Please, please.
One, there are two other packets that you have. One has red stripes on it, and with the changes in payroll, these are the new cover sheets in each of the departments for you. We address those. And then pay scales, which I think we're gonna go through. Tom, are you good with doing pay scales next? Well, you should have a presentation.
I do.
You should have two. Pay
I
scales
don't. I have one. I have the government one.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know Zach, Zach is the deputy finance manager, and he is also, he's here today because last year, when we embarked on a review of our wages and benefits. Zach was the one that did most of the heavy lifting. You should have it now. So I want to just walk you through, without doing the 2.5-hour presentation that I gave to council last year, and without spending a lot of time, any time in this presentation on police and fire, because those are bargained and we're really not dealing with those today. I wanted to take just a minute to kind of set the stage for why we're having the conversation and what we found. So I'm sure if you've read the news, you know that there is a definite issue in the labor market these days. Trying to retain high-performing employees and recruit new employees, I think, is a challenge for every employer. Next slide. In Orono, it is a particular, the reason is, one of the reasons it's such a challenge is, no, you were good, you were good. One of the reasons it was such a challenge is if you look at the consumer price index, you will see that we were chugging right along, hovering in that 1 to 2.5% range. And then last year, it just started taking off. Right as of April of 2022, the Northeast, all cities, consumer price index is 8.3. So it has most definitely been chugging along, which causes all sorts of issues. And then you add to that the Great Resignation and changes in minimum wage, all coming together at the same time. There are a lot of people trying to keep employees. Next slide, please. In Orono, this is an even bigger challenge. First, as we identified back in November with the town council, before we were just seeing the takeoff of the CPI, of inflation. And we identified pretty quickly that the town of Orono was in the lower end of the wage for competitive wages, pretty much across the board. And it becomes an even bigger issue because in some places you could just drop people and wait for the cycle to wait for the right person to come who's willing to work at your rate. In Orono, we've always staffed for what we need, not the extra. So vacancies are really hard for us to cover, and they stretch an already tight staff even tighter. So when we talk about the pay scale, the market analysis that Zach led the way on, we looked at a variety of things. We looked at all of the data we could get from Old Town, Brewer, Bangor, Hamden. Bangor, we understand we're not even in the same ballpark with, but it's helpful because they are a competitor for people. And then it also allowed us to, MMA has a salary survey tool, instrument database that allows us to go in and pick our comparables in a variety of different ways. We can say by population, by area, by region. We can even pick our own comparable communities. So when we undertook this, we were expecting we were a little off. I don't think I expected that we were as much off as we were. So just to frame this conversation, Orono has 87 positions that we would want to fill. 35 of them are unionized, so those are public safety response people. 52 of them are non-union. 48 of those are full-time. 4 of them are part-time. Part-time, it's a 0.4, 0.4, 0.5, 0.7. So part-time folks. Next slide. So when we engaged on this, the goal was to try to come up with pay scales. Right now, our pay scale is ginormous. It's like 35 by 12 wide. and it's just numbers plotted in. And when I got here, the history had been when somebody got to the edge of a range, they just flipped back and came to the next raise and the next range and kind of flipped through. And so we did some changes back in 2015 or 16 to really identify what a range was and how a job description sat on a range. But we didn't really tweak the tool itself. So right now, if you were to look at that tool, the top third of it is blacked out because it is no longer legal to pay people those wages. And then there is a grayed out section because as a town, we had committed to try to not have people working for less than $15 an hour. So we have not addressed pay scales meaningfully in a very long time. When we wanted to look at those, wanted to try to make Orono relatively competitive externally. So not be the highest paid, but not be the lowest paid, be somewhere in the middle where we could recruit and retain skilled workers. We also wanted to ensure some internal equity. And when I say that, what I mean is looking at what the responsibilities are for every position. What's the level of responsibility? What skills do you have to bring into that job? How hard is it going to be to replace this person? What are the hours this person has to work? Is this all the time, holidays, nights, weekends? Is it just 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day? So we wanted to be able to justify within our own structure how those people are put on the pay scale. We wanted it to be a tool to retain our high-performing people and to reduce our overall turnover within the organization. Along with the money, which you see here, we also made changes around flexible work environment, 4-day work week, things that the industry is beginning to expect. We've made some of those changes to make it a better place. Next slide. So, as Zach found, we couldn't find very many apples to compare to. It's more like a fruit salad. Do you want to talk just a little bit about that, Zach?
A lot of the challenge we found when I was comparing the positions is that certain positions are very specialized. For example, our clerks handle a wide range of responsibility versus like the clerks in Bangor. Some of them have very specialized positions, and it makes it very difficult to compare, our people who are the apples with a wide range of responsibility to, I'm just using Bangor as an example, the oranges. So it's difficult to kind of weigh it in there, and especially with some of our management department head positions. What we have for positions are very different than what other towns have for positions, and the kind of cookie cutter roles that the MMA salary survey gives us to work with.
So,
Translation, we tend to have folks who are asked to do many jobs under the mantle of one job.
we have lots of multiple hats that are worn.
Like
And
many small towns do.
yeah, yeah. Next,
So, did we use a couple towns or what did we end up using? I guess?
so we ended up using the MMA salary survey along with specific salary data that we received from Old Town, Bangor, Hamden, and Brewer, along with, we participated with the City of Waterville. City of Waterville was doing a paid compensation analysis. We provided data to that so that we could get their data back, and that included a wide range of other communities as well. So I think that, and we sliced the data in multiple ways, Leo, to try to account for differences. So as an example, a laborer in some communities is somebody on the business end of a shovel who never gets into a piece of equipment. In other communities, that would be just a single job. Here, we have equipment operators that are also laborers, that are also specialized, a welder or a mason or something of that nature. So what we ended up doing is looking at multiple job titles to try to find the ones that fit the best with the job that we were trying to compare to. So the dotted and dashed, I realize not everybody can see color. So the dotted and dashed these are old. I have not updated them from November, but when we did the analysis, the dotted and dashed is Orono as a laborer. The heavy black line, which would be the third one down if you go all the way over to the right, is what the MMA salary survey for our comparable communities would tell us where people are. So as you can see, we are under the market pretty significantly.
What is the x-axis here?
The X is years on the job. Yeah, pay scale, years on the job.
What does the MMA consider comparable communities? Is that the same that we consider our comparables?
It set up a filter for us and it used Bangor, Brewer, Hampton, and Old Town was what they considered our regional comparables.
So Bangor calls a grade 3, what others call a grade 6, is that?
Yep.
What's that bottom?
The bottom one is Brewer. I can tell you that Brewer did a significant wage adjustment right after we pulled the data.
And then the blue one is Hampton.
Next one up is
Solid.
Hamden. Yep. So I've got just a few to just kind of run through real quick to give you the sense, and then most of them are not this detailed. Next one. So a facilities laborer, the dotted line would be the laborer grade 6 for facilities. For Bangor, we are the dotted dash light blue line. And the MMA salary survey would be the top orange line that kind of connects to the red line at the very, very top.
So we're right on target, Bangor, correct? Am I reading that?
For a
correctly?
laborer grade 6, which is my understanding, a laborer grade 6 in Bangor is somebody who is working with other people, only doing assigned labor tasks, not necessarily what our laborers do, which is in equipment and other things. Continue. WPCF, there is an issue with our dot there because we used our highest paid lab tech at the time, who is now our superintendent. WPCF laborer for us right now makes $18.50 an hour. So that gives you kind of the sense. And
Not on this chart. Scale.
not on the scale, no. Next. Appointed clerks. So this would be our town clerk. And you'll see the line represents the trend line, and we are a little bit under that. I will say that our town clerk also is the deputy tax collector and a whole bunch of other things that other clerks in that are not.
It's been recognized statewide for
Yeah,
excelling in her job.
she does a nice job. All right, next. So this is MMA graph that MMA actually, the program spits out for us. And this one had a little bit different grouping of comparables, I thought. Oh, we did, okay. So this shows you one of the reasons why I took steps to bring our planner up to up a bit.
So what are the other dots?
The minimum hourly, the mid hourly, and the max hourly as reported in the MMA salary survey
Which were
for a
from
town server, town planner.
planner from what communities?
Are comparable communities in the region.
How do they determine comparable communities though? We've gone back and forth on this, talking about population and tax base.
I think it's really hard to determine because you can pull it all the different ways on like tax valuation, population, similar, size of the town and everything. And we just kind of ran with, they pre-generated a filter for us. It was just the Orono regional peer group. And that was kind of what we used.
So why doesn't this show the actual for the town like the other ones do?
Because the other ones, Zach physically went through union contracts to find that information and plotted those charts himself. This is generated out of the MMA salary survey. You're not going to find a union contract for a planner. Next. Code enforcement officer, still the same kind of issue. Next. Our library director, you'll see we don't have that issue. Next. Public Works Director is in the mid of that peer group. Next. Assistant Town Manager is in the lower mid of that peer group. Next. Clerk in that peer group was almost on. Next. Deputy clerk. So this is another place where we have a really hard time comparing what a deputy clerk in each community does something very differently. Next. Town manager. And that should be the end. Is that the end, Bill? We're gonna.
It is the end. I can't get the controls to show up.
So I can tell you that we are in this position where we have an incredibly dedicated, skilled workforce that we have invested an awful lot of time and money into getting. We lost a WPCF operator this year who came to us without any of the licenses, spent 2 years getting those licenses, and is going to work for $5 an hour more for the city of Bangor or for the Bangor wastewater. So we are off. And the problem with this individual leaving, I mean, nobody owes us to come to work every day. I mean, I'm not trying to say that he can't, of course he can leave. But the issue is that now we had made a decision to go smaller in wastewater and recoup some of the savings that we could from the superintendent leaving, and we were going to manage some of the reasons why we had added the person 3 or 4 years ago through a collaboration with Public Works. Sounded like a great plan. Now I'm down one. The only way that I can get the collection system work done that absolutely has to get done is to put somebody brand new who has never done that on the business end of a flusher and hope it works. And otherwise I've got my superintendent in the lab instead of being a superintendent during a year that we've got $1.4 million of wastewater work being done out there and trying to renew a license. So that story is the same in any department that you would go into. I am very concerned that it's easy to say a body equals another body. And when you've had somebody here for 4 or 5 years, they have lots of skills that everybody's looking for, and we are paying among the lowest, we are going to lose them. And replacing them is not going to be easy. The quality of candidate that we're getting is not, there aren't as many of them, and they are not coming with the same kind of qualifications that they would have in the past. And so I look at positions that we have to have: code enforcement, planning, the assessor, the contract assessor. Those are critical. There aren't a lot of them. And if there are lots of openings, we don't have what it takes to draw them here right now. So that is where we came to this idea of adjusting the pay scales, which you have in front of you. Pay scales that the top of each of these boxes is the proposed FY23 pay scale, and the bottom one is where that range of jobs were on the previous pay scale. So one of the things I am suggesting is, instead of taking one gigantic pay scale and wondering where somebody goes, to clearly identify, this is the pay scale for operators, this is the one, in infrastructure, this is what folks are gonna, where folks are gonna land. I also am suggesting that we add a very clearly defined entry level. In public works, for example, as a laborer, you can come to me with absolutely no skill. You can come to me with some skill, or some skill and a commercial driver's license. And instead of putting them on the pay scale at A, and then when they get their CDL, bump them up, so now they're running on top of people who have been here for time. The idea of looking at that entry and placing them there if they don't come with everything that we would expect a laborer to have. An operator would be the same idea. So
What's our probation time?
So in the public sector, you are not considered a public employee until you've been on the job for 6 months. So we use a 6-month probation. With a new law that just passed, we can still do essentially employment at will for 6 months, but after 4 months, people have to be entitled to take paid time off. So that's shifted a little bit, but the employment at will is 6 months for non-union staff.
Okay.
Aren't they always employer?
No. So even without a personnel policy that turns it to just cause, we can only separate for just cause, or for a reason. Under state law, an employee, every year that they work in the public setting, they are actually gaining a property interest in their job. So we are not just cause, not at will employers. You can't just decide, I don't like you today, go.
No, but I assume a position can be changed or.
Sure, absolutely. But the termination of an employee, they have a property interest in their job. So after the probationary period, it is very difficult to just get rid of a person unless there is a very clear reason for it. Reduction in force, but then you have to prove certain things if you do that, or termination for cause. You have to go through the just cause process. Not impossible. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just not at will, where you can.
Is there a whole riffing process within a department if a position goes away? If there are multiple people, there's a whole riff.
Yes. So I will just suggest that I've gone 22 years, almost 23 years without riffing. I would like to really, really work at making a whole career without that. Ready for the next? So the administrative professional support people, the same setup. If you look with this position, I have given you all the way over to the left of this scale, where who would kind of fall into what range. And then down at the bottom, the overall description for what a 1, 2, 3, or 4 would be. And then I did the same for salaried, highly professional, technical management folks. For salaried folks, they don't tend to have like progressive steps on a scale. They negotiate something when they come in. And then we look at increases as market requires or merit, but the idea being the general entry and then the high range. And again, with this one, put who belongs where. You will notice the town manager's line is blank because I don't believe it's my job to set my pay scale. I think that's yours. I did for this budget, following Councilor Perry's direction, use the same methodology that I use for everybody else's to determine the councilor's pay for the budget, the town manager's pay for the budget.
So are these what drove row 2, column
That
2?
23 with market. So what that means is putting people on this new pay scale, I would consider a market change. We're deriving these pay scales to address market concerns. And then in order to implement it, because $370-something thousand is a lot of money, I took, again, some guidance, and we looked at employees who currently make under 54,000, and we used 70,000, and then we used everybody else. And then we broke that down by percentage. Ultimately decided that it would make the most sense to bring up folks at the lower end of the pay scale the quickest. So we broke that into 2 FY arrays in FY 23 and 1 in 24. And the higher paid people, we broke into 3 to implement it a little slower. I don't know what other information you would like to talk about pay scales, but as part of the town council process, you would, these would be things, pay scales are things that you have to adopt, and we would likely adopt them as part of the budget process.
So if you have one question, not on pay scales.
Yeah.
If there's no other comments on that. I'm looking at this summary page.
Yep.
And it does not include the possibility of using opera funds for the items that you shared with us.
No, but I could do that real quick and tell you what.
And it looks to me as though that would bring the municipal tax rate increase very low.
Yeah, so let me just real quick give you the number, Tom. $238, right? So that is a 1.47% increase, 113,182.
Or 7.
So that drops the total net for commitment down to 434,301 or 3.38.
Where are you looking at that?
I'm creating-
For commitment.
Yeah, so I'm just, if I run the number of accepting everything, it would, again, we don't control the actual mill rate, but based on initial conversations with the assessor, I'm not expecting a wide swing in the value this year. We have losses, but we think they'll be tempered with gains. So that would be an 80-cent increase in the mill rate.
Total. And I'm might have not been paying close enough attention. That would bring the projected municipal mill rate to,
24.56.
that's the total projected rate,
Mhm.
24.56.
So I think we've got an issue in this calculation, Tom. I want to go back, but right now it says the municipal mill rate would be $10.08. And I think that that's not correct.
That's what it is currently.
Yeah, so I don't think I think it's not correct. So I need to,
You think it's less than?
oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. It must be almost a $500,000 less than that.
So I know Belle can hear me. I'm sure she's gonna play with that
Good.
to make sure we have
Yeah, we can
the
get
right
that.
number. But we ready to go on
Shall
to
we?
general government? I mean, I feel like I talk a lot and people don't talk back to me too much, so I don't wanna. Okay. All right, so we're using the new departmental sheets for general government, these ones. And, I mean, I thought I needed Zach for backup for that. That was. Leo, you look like you have a question.
Sure I do.
Okay.
It is a lot of information to get handed kind of just at the start of a meeting. Here, review these all now in real time. Which I know it's a lot to put together, but in future it would be helpful to have to review in advance.
Next. So we're going to talk about general government, which is our last cost center. General government includes town council, finance, information technology, the town manager's office, the town clerk's office, elections, insurances, general assistance as general government, but also the miscellaneous that fall under here are debt and other. So in general government, we are looking at the town council. Town council's budget is $61,705. It's an increase of $11,400 or 23%. Council wages are established by charter, so there is nothing we can do about that one. Training and supplies of $47.50. Dues and memberships of $9,000. This is the primary memberships here are the MMA membership for the town, split with WPCF, and the Service Center Coalition's membership. Audit services of $27,000. If you'll remember from the notes, $27,000 represents the $21,000 audit fee that is by contract, plus additional funds that are expected for the single item audit that we likely will have because of federal grant money that we are receiving. employee recognition, and then contingency. I don't know if there are any discussion items from this. One of the increases here that was significant was moving travel and training from $1,000 to $4,000. That's based on an assumption of mine, listening to council, that you wanted to continue to fund formal DEI training and the facilitation of the annual work plan.
I certainly want to see continued work on DEI. I don't necessarily know that that requires a 300% increase in that line item, as it is I think we can leverage a lot of volunteer support and expertise in town for that potentially. So I guess I'm curious a little bit about the breakdown there. I know I thought the work plan facilitation was really valuable and helpful, and I'm curious how much of that increases that versus other proposed trainings.
So the work plan work was a total of $2,400. So
So that's most of the increase there.
if you use that same two
Yeah.
two session planning.
Great, thanks for that info.
I think the other part too to that just is that, I mean, the increase is that we are now traveling again. Before we were swimming, so for the last 2 years, we were swimming and we weren't going to physically going to conferences as well, or trainings.
Which is supposed to be part of,
Right.
right, that we would travel to housing conference in Augusta and bring back that knowledge and share it with council. It's not exclusively DEI work or professional development. Although I will say on the DEI piece, we had a lot of thoughtful conversations around funding that kind of training. And I would say respectfully to your, comment that, well, there's lots of volunteers, like as respectfully as possible, what I would say is 2 things. One, the town has tried to patch a lot of things together with volunteers, and volunteers are not always just available because we think they should be, or hope that they would be. And the second thing, and this is part of the thoughtful conversation we had about this budgetary item, I'm not comfortable asking free labor on DEI work. That's me personally, and I know that that was also the feeling of
I
those of us who
certainly,
put this together.
I certainly wouldn't expect volunteers to step up and run trainings for town staff, for example, but if and when we implement a committee that is presumably staffed by volunteers, that will be a huge resource to the town. And it sounds like the majority of this budget item is in fact this training that we've already benefited from, and so I don't see a need to quibble about the additional couple $100 in there. Thanks.
I'm not quibbling, I'm just responding to your comments
Okay.
because otherwise, I mean, that's what we're here for, is to,
Yeah.
to talk about each other's points and
Appreciate
views and have these,
Yeah.
for the public as well, who are
Yeah.
wondering.
It sounds like there isn't actually much funding for DEI in there. It's really
Well, it's
a couple
just-
$100,
It's
which is fine.
council. The
Yeah,
only
it's for
thing that
council.
this is for
Okay.
council.
Perfect.
So we were in a position where we very much needed that professional development because council was dysfunctional to the point that we were not getting things done the way that we should have. And I don't think we want to ever see that happen again. So,
Yeah.
but yes, but it is just a training line item.
Great. Thanks.
Finance, anything else people want to talk about in the council budget?
There was just an acknowledgement, there was a change in the percentage of time that was both the manager and the assistant managers positions were paid for under the TIP.
Yeah, we'll get to that in the town manager's budget if we can. Finance office is staff's 2.5 people. The total budget's $253,215, along with, so this is up $4,150 or 20%. Along staff costs are actually not up very much at all in this budget. Actually, they're down. And because of benefit election, we have the group life and flex account fees in this department. They are not really anything we can change unless we were to eliminate the flex account program. The group life insurance is a statutory requirement for certain retirees. We don't have a choice there. Postage and supplies. Postage is going up this year. As part of our effort to be more communicative, we are sending more stuff out. And while some people respond nicely to web stuff, we also have a large contingent that wants written things. So that's, and we did not put enough in for the postage increase last year. The professional services line of 40,000 is up 2,300. 300 of that is our Trio software licensing fee, and the other is the HR payroll process software.
Question. On the employee count spreadsheet that you gave us, it says 5.5.
So that's it. That is administration, finance and administration, which includes the town clerk's office. They're all lumped into finance and administration.
Thanks. So there's 3 plus 2.5.
Yep.
Gotcha.
I'm wondering if this was a typo in the original.
Could be.
For 2022 year, yeah, up to now, in postage, it says we've only spent $258.
Yeah, no, that wasn't a typo. What happens is every May, June, we fill a postage meter.
Okay.
So we spend it throughout the previous year. So we just did that and spent almost $10,000. We'll have another top off coming up after the next round of bills go out.
Yeah, that looked phenomenal.
Yeah.
Overall,
Yeah.
the budget made sense, but I was wondering about that.
Yeah, our postage meter is attached to a reserve account, and we have to fill the reserve account in increments.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That makes sense. Val, is there anything you want to talk about? Oh, wait, no, we're not there yet. So finance, this does continue to assume that I do the finance. I'm the treasurer and the finance director. So if you want to change that, now's the time to do that.
Where does the observer come out? What budget is that?
Well,
Or
that
is that
comes,
the observer?
so the work comes out of the town manager's office. Nancy does that
Right.
with a little bit of help from her friends and Pete graphic design. But it's funded out of the economic development.
Okay.
So, Belle, do you want me to do your departments or do you want to do them? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm struggling here with controls.
So we have an IT department. It is staffed by one individual who is shared with economic development. The increase in this line is, well, we've got payroll at 70,525. We have the hardware at 700. We've moved to a lot of cloud-based service, which costs us about $16,000 a year for all the departments. So this is funding, when we look at hardware repair, the cloud-based services and the professional services, the telephone and the internet, that's funding across the whole town except for economic development, which runs on its own budget.
So the
yeah.
increase that we talked about with the deputy chief of the police department based on the new camera systems that they're proposing. Is that included in this cloud-based line?
No.
Then what is the CGIS compliant online backup system?
I
So
told you-
that is our backup, that's Amazon Web Services Glacier. We back up the network attached storage device where all their investigative material is stored. That gets stored on a local device and then backed up to Amazon Cloud Services. And that particular service is a CGIS compliant backup service. Whereas we cannot put it on Google Drive because Google Drive is not a CGIS compliant service.
So are the police body cams and the cameras that are proposed for the interrogation room?
Those are separate. Those are stored on a server, currently a local server. And what is proposed, if all the equipment ever arrives, there will be both local storage and cloud storage, but that is managed by Motorola, not by us.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Other questions about IT? We are looking at some restructuring in IT. This had been 51% GIS, 49% IT. We have done pretty extensive analysis and determined that we have some critical issues with IT and we need more time for IT. So we are looking at redesigning the job description in this department to be focused primarily on IT. Started out as an IT GIS, moved more to GIS, and we have not given IT the attention that it needs.
So how does that manifest as its increase? Exactly.
That increase is based on a requirement. This job is governed by a prevailing wage prevailing wage that is given to us by the federal government that we have to pay based on the job description that we write for this job. We're required to stay within that job description until we revise the job description.
Clarify what you're saying now. For the IT position,
Yes,
it's governed by some federal guidelines on pay. Is that what you said?
yep, US CIS, so Customs and Immigration govern this position.
Because of the individual.
Is there an I-9 or something like that?
There's a visa here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Question? Yep.
Yeah, there was also what was the other big chunk here that stood out, the consultant services. Can you tell me just a little bit more about what's going on there?
Sure. So when we discovered that we had significant IT issues, we also discovered that we had allowed the job to creep too much to IT, and we needed to bring it back to GIS to be in that majority of GIS that the job description requires. So we did that. It involved us bringing a consultant on to handle IT, simply because a majority of the current job needs to be GIS focused and not IT focused. So in order to deal with some critical infrastructure and systems issues, we brought SJ Rollins on to consult. So we're buying consulting time.
Did it just appear that you're flipping that back, or sorry, I stepped out for a
So
second.
there is a process in order to do that. We have to go through a revision of a job description, which we're embarking on that process.
But this is budgeting this increase for this consulting next year, even though we're changing that position.
It's going to take some time to change that position.
Other questions?
Next is the town manager's office. This position, this one funds, technically the IT person lives in this department, so it's 4. Increase personnel costs, like most all of the other departments, is the primary driver in this department. We also have professional services. Essentially, most all of the legal fees and high, consulting work that we need through the year comes out of this department. The other large driver in this department is the regional transit, which is up $25,000. It was 29, now it's 25. And public health, we have been asked to contribute to a little bit more to the homeless shelter, so that is what is driving this increase. So, oh, go ahead.
So this is different than the one we had, obviously.
Yep.
I'm trying to figure out how or why. The percentages are the same. But instead of a 50,000 increase, it's a 19,000 increase.
It was an 11% before.
It was 29% before.
Yep.
So what happened that changed?
So I shifted 5 hours of my time, 5 hours of Bell's time into the tip to account for work that we did, that we're doing, that will be tip eligible.
Okay, so now is that narrative not actually accurate then, where it says 87.5 to 75%?
Yeah,
That's not accurate.
that is not. I did not change the narratives, I changed the numbers.
Gotcha.
So these are all like small amounts that I keep pointing out
No.
here, but these are, so in office supplies, I mean, I see 2019 used almost 1,500, but for the last couple of years, it seems like we're not going to come close to that.
So this past year, as soon as I recognized a significant overage in the fire department, I told everybody to stop buying things unless they absolutely needed them. So normally in April, May, you would see us replenishing all sorts of things. One of the things that you would normally see would be the billing of having the budget notebooks printed. We did that internally this year. I don't know if long-term that's going to be great for the photocopier, but I'm looking to set the example that we are curtailing expenses as best we can, given the huge increase overage in the fire department. And I think you'll see some come in because there are some things that have to be purchased out of that line.
I was also curious in professional services line, in overall, maybe it's just because I'm new, so I haven't been. Or is in the overhaul of the town's personnel ordinance, what's happening there? I know that's maybe not strictly a question for the
Oh,
budget,
no, that's a
but
good one. So if you look at the town's personnel ordinance, it is very old. And we have tried to piecemeal it little bits at a time. We're finding that so much of it is integrated that what we really need to do is sit down and use some consulting time, some legal time to get some best practice language in and just get it done. So that we have a modern personnel ordinance.
Is that all legal, basically?
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't, I mean, I can,
That's what that line.
yeah.
typically is.
If I could just step away from the scrutinizing of the numbers just for a second, because I want to talk about the narrative that came with this particular department. I really appreciated this, both the for discussion and the areas of concern. And I would encourage the public, these documents are available on the website. If you want to look under general government, it would be in their packet, but I think it really highlights the struggle of putting the budget together versus the public's perception of what it is that we're doing. There have been a remarkable increase in demands for services. And not even just the public, I mean, the public, counselors, other local elected officials, or even, you know, the wide field of candidates we saw run for election this cycle. There's a lot of talk about a desire for increased services, but also to decrease the mill rate. And trust me, I want that too. But I think that this, for me, this narrative in the town manager's office section really perfectly encapsulates what the struggle has been for the last couple of years, because we really are, as a community, demanding more from the town as an entity and from its personnel as individuals. And most of that lands first and foremost in the town manager's office. We cannot fund those things in our current situation. And as this document really points out, although we are seeing a massive increase in a budget that was already pretty high last year, this is the cost of maintaining what we were already doing. And so year after year, we find ourselves walking this tightrope where I feel as a counselor, like many times we've kicked cans down the road to get to a particular number that the public could be comfortable with and that we could live with as counselors, who then have to explain ourselves to the public. But what we've been doing is putting Band-Aids on things, stretching things, pushing things. And we've also seen during this time an increase in the public's desire for more services, but also for lower taxes. And I just really wanted to highlight this page and open it up for discussion as well. Because we can sit here and scrutinize line by line, like, which we're supposed to do. That's part of this process, and say, well, why are we spending so much on this? And can we spend less on that? And that is the budgetary process, but I don't want to get so far into the meticulous dollars and cents line items that we forget the bigger picture here, which is we have very limited resources. We have a community that already expects a very high level of service. And we've seen a very, very vocal increase in demands for more services. And I feel like we're being pushed to a breaking point with the resources we have available. And so that should be, for me, that should be a big picture conversation we're having during this budget hearing of several weeks, not just saying like, well, can we not buy this $30,000 thing right now? The larger conversation is like, what if a budget is an ethical document, what exactly are ethics? How are we allocating our resources, knowing that our choices are either to only stay within this pool of money that is acceptable to council and community vis-a-vis the tax rate, or are we saying, well, we really do need to fund what we already have, and yes, we do also want to do more to respond to the community's demands, instead of just sort of saying, we don't want the tax rate to be high, or, you know, I mean, I just want us to have a realistic conversation, because I feel like this is something that we have continually pushed off year after year.
Well said, Megan. That's a great little soapbox.
Yes, I would ask, obviously I just participated in the election, but what are you, in your mind, what are the additional services that the community has been clamoring for?
I think that Sophie really highlights that really well in this narrative, talking about like looking to what's going on at the state and national level, looking to what other larger, better funded cities are doing, even locally, but also nationally, and saying, well, Bangor is doing X, Y, and Z. Orono needs to live up to that standard, or a greater call for all kinds of things that personally I would like to see, I would love to do as well, like
Right.
I want to prioritize accessibility. I want to prioritize equity. I want to prioritize the things that would make human beings be able to live in a fair, equitable way with decency in our community. But there's a big gap between sitting at home and saying, well, Bangor has this, or Boston has that, or Seattle does this, versus the money that we actually have to work with. And there are a lot of people who, like me, are passionate about these things, but are not really listening to the conversation about what resources are available, and then are just being angry that we're not doing those things. And so even in, like, say, the candidates night, there was a lot of talk about, yeah, the town should do this and it should do that. We want more of this and we want more of that. And not just equity and DEI work and accessibility, but also services, just regular run-of-the-mill services. Keep what we have, maybe add a little bit more, but we also need to lower the tax rate. And my question is, how do we do that? I don't think that's.
I guess I appreciate that narrative as well. And my perspective on this, because the narrative, for those at home that haven't read it yet, was basically saying we're trying to act like a big city. And historically, we haven't been. We've been more operational. My personal opinion is we are not a big city. We shouldn't be trying to act like a big city. And we can't afford to act like a big city. So I think we should be more operational as we've been in the past, personally, which is probably 180 degrees from what you may feel, but that's how I feel about again, I appreciate it. I thought that was a really good narrative as well. But to me, I think the direction is okay. Now let's stop trying to act like a city.
I guess I would take issue with that characterization, because I think what I hear when you say act like a big city is I hear you pushing on those like DEI, equity, inclusivity kind of buttons. And that's not exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I would say that we should look very carefully at the services we offer in general. And yes, we can't fund the same kind of, like, we can't have a dedicated person that does X job where maybe Bangor can afford that, or maybe Boston can afford that. But also we can prioritize parts of our budget to make sure that you don't have to live in a big city to be treated fairly and equitably. You can live and have the same, you know, the same comfort of life that anyone else might have. And so I want to make sure that we're not saying big city to mean like DEI, because that is not what I mean, and that's not the conversation I want to have right now.
Yeah, no, that's, but it does come down to, I think 5 years ago, I think we had a part-time planner. We had a 20-hour planner, and I don't know if they did, no, it was just Kevin, so he didn't do something else, I guess, but now we have a full-time. So those are that, so I'm not talking DEI either.
Okay.
I'm talking about trying to function,
Right.
having full-time people where we, in the past, we haven't, now we have them. And when you have that, those departments tend to continue to grow.
Right.
And that's, I think, an issue, and why I brought up the 16 and a half new employees in 7 years. That will continue to, that's a big growth that you might see in a big city, but we're not. So that
Well,
is
we've
what
had
I'm
a
talking
big growth too. We've had, in the last few years, we've had 3 big complexes come into town. So students are now in town where they were on campus before. And that requires services.
I think
That's a
that requires,
population
I think
increase.
that requires, well, police and fire, they were somewhere before, to be candid. The university has grown by a couple thousand, maybe over that time. No, probably
I
not
would
even.
have to look at those numbers.
I mean,
think
it's
the
still under
university's
12, I
grown
think, and it's
a
been from
lot
10
in
to
the
12.
last 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think of a planner as being a key driver of economic development. But that's-
I think we all look at slightly different perspective, but with the same goal. And the goal is that there are lots of needs and there are limited resources. And we try to bring a balance to that.
Right.
And I think that's what council has done in the past, and I think that's what we're trying to do now. We may see the needs differently, we may see the resources differently, but we're trying to balance those needs and resources. And I appreciate the job that our staff is doing, helping us do that. We ready to move on? or-
I am.
Good.
We look at the town clerk's office. So in Orono, the town clerk manages tax collection process, motor vehicle, vital records, elections, variety of those kind of the services that many people equate to being kind of the town.
By the way, I just want to say that the saddest part of postponing general government as we did is that we don't get the benefit of Shelley's presence.
I know.
I wouldn't want to ask her to come to a meeting she didn't plan for, but I always enjoy seeing her. So I'll just have to go visit her.
She just got back from the National Clerks Association. She actually got a scholarship to go all the way down to Arkansas by way of Colorado and Texas. And I mean, she was all
Las Vegas.
she had some trouble getting there. So in this department, payroll expenses, as you see, are actually almost a net zero, not quite, because of a change in election of health insurance. When we look at this department, it is up a total of $215, which doesn't register as a percent increase. The primary expenses in this department are associated with the legal aspects of the titulars, the licensing part, the vital records part, the advertising and outreach, that the expenses might be more than $1,000, but we would have additional revenue to offset it. So that's a pretty small budget. Printing, the tax bills, sewer bills, and 30-day notices come out of this line. So they really have not made too much of a change. Copier maintenance, this is for overages. Like I said, we are going up in the amount of paper that people want and that they want us to deliver to them.
Can I ask a more holistic question?
Sure.
So in previous years, we've had a lot of conversation about this department and its staffing and the state requirements for the jobs that are done down there. How are we doing? We've made some changes, we've changed hours, we've messed with positions and things. And so how are the changes working for folks downstairs?
So I'm going to take a shot at this, but Belle actually supervises this department, so I'll ask her to pop in. So that department is a feast or famine department. It's either absolutely crazy busy or it is kind of slows down, ebbs and I think that the 10-hour days allow us to catch a little bit more of the ebb, which allows us to get more back-end stuff done. So I think that shifting the days has been a helpful thing. I do think that running with 3 down there is, it's tight. And there are times that Shelley is not able to be in the back office doing her work because she needs to be out front. We do have a minimum staffing level in this department for cash handling purposes of 2 people. We have an individual from public safety that is trained to fill in if needed, but it's the people that are down there are highly trained. They've invested a lot of time and energy to get to where they are. It's a highly stressful job that's even more stressful now. I don't know why people have not learned that you catch a lot more with honey than you do vinegar. Some of the stuff that they have to deal with downstairs is just not fair.
And in spite of it, they are the most pleasant and accommodating people that you could ask for.
Yes. So I think we're learning how to make things work. I also, right now, we have 2 dedicated elections volunteers who get paid during election season, but come in and volunteer at other times of the year to help keep the elections moving. You know, one of the things that happens in Orono is we have a very high transient population, but you're not allowed to just get rid of voter registrations. And it means that we are dealing with a huge voter list. And when we have an election, we have tons of people that are registering for the first time. So there's a lot of work that has to happen in a very short amount of time. I don't know that we would be able to have the output that we currently have if we didn't have the personnel that we have down there. That Shelley, number one, is just, she is, well, the people in that department allow it to function at a standard that is so much higher than even, we've had great people here before, but I'm not sure that they could deal with this output. So I think part of it is systems put in place. I think the schedule has helped. But the other part of it is really employee driven. So if we were to lose one of them, I don't know if replacing one would allow us to come up to the same output.
And are we, what about online transactions? Like, what has the shift been like since things opened up a little bit?
We are seeing a lot more happening online, which helps at the counter. We've driven, so before this is one of the COVID silver linings. Before the pandemic, most everything you needed to do, you could re-register your car online, but most everything else you had to come in for. We have cut down on some of the traffic because people are using the online service. Thing that people need to understand is when you use the online service, it means you don't have to come in and stand in front of the counter for that transaction. However, we are still handling the back office function of that transaction. So there is still work involved with that. Even if we don't get the agent fee, we're still handling, the transaction still comes to us. So I think that is a big piece. We are coming up on a gubernatorial election, which is going to drive a lot of work. But people seem to enjoy the new hours, and I do think it allows it to drive kind of in waves through the day, so somebody can take a moment and work. The other thing is, we've said, if you're off the counter, you're off the counter and do your project, and people can wait for a few minutes. And it's not motor vehicle wait yet. When it gets to be a motor vehicle time, wait time, then we would think about customer service.
Have you had any public feedback on the new hours?
None,
None.
zero.
Only those the counselors.
Yeah, well, nobody has passed it along to me. I can't say that. I have heard from former counselors who are thrilled that they can register their vehicle at 5 o'clock at night, and they never used to be able to.
I've only heard from a couple, but they've been asking, when are they gonna be open on Fridays again? But I mean, it's a sample of probably 3, 4.
I will tell you, it starts at 7:30. People are here waiting for us, and there are times we close the door at 5:30 with somebody still here waiting for us. And it gives us the half hour in the morning to cash up when we come in without customers. So I am, if there was something telling me that there was mass concern about having 4 10-hour days to come in and get your business done, then I would definitely consider that. But also, just from a general HR perspective, what we're hearing is flexible work schedules and 4 days a week are the things to do to offset some of the pay gap. Which is why right now, everybody except for whatever reason, public safety folks haven't converted to the 4-day work week, the non-union folks, but they might someday. Me too. I love it.
Other things in this section?
Not for the clerk. Val, you all set? I'll take that as a yes. So elections is $21,778. It is an increase of $4,204. This year, 24%. Part-time salary has gone up because of the gubernatorial election. We will need more clerks on, so they get paid an hourly rate for that. And the election supply and coding lines go up because we have additional ballots that have to get managed.
So Sophie, the elections in 2024, how is that? How are we juxtaposing the 2023 budget?
That's a presidential.
Oh, okay, never mind.
I know, I try not to think about it also. But
You're right. No,
it's coming.
I know.
And it's gonna be
Sorry,
sorry,
sorry, sorry. Yep.
Questions on elections?
Are we charged for the use of the field house when we hold elections up there?
Well, we have not received a bill yet, have we, for that?
So the field house does not charge us. However, due to the upcoming construction at the university, we will not be able to use the field house. So we are exploring alternative locations. We think that we have identified a really good location. We're not ready to roll it out publicly yet until the Secretary of State's office blesses it, but it does mean that there is likely to be a charge, mostly because the location requires having their staff there the whole time that we're there.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. Ultimately, the town council controls where elections happen in Orono. However, before that comes to you, we get it vetted by the Secretary of State's office. We are still looking at a location on campus, just not one so closely affiliated with student life.
That's for November, not
That would be for November. June. we would
Correct.
have
For the-
in this,
year.
yep.
Yeah, for the gubernatorial, because the traffic is significantly higher than the March and the June elections.
Anything else on elections?
That's all I know.
Shall we move on?
Sure. So the next is insurance. Unemployment is actually a reserve account. We are self-funded unemployment. Workers' comp, this is where general, which means all of the departments that are not specifically classified for workers' comp feed into here. So the manager's office and the administrative folks. The risk pool is our general liability and officers insurance. And the workers' comp and safety incentive is our annual safety day that we stop everything and try to work with our staff on whatever our loss run tells us is important for education. And also if we don't have something that stands out, we pick a best practice, usually involving workplace claims, just because those are the highest national drivers.
Comment on the workers' comp.
So the workers' comp increase, our workers' comp is based on payroll, but also an experience rating. Our experience rating, a few years ago, I was sitting in front of council touting our 0.8 or 0.7 experience mod. We've had a couple of really expensive claims that have driven that way up. So we're dealing with payroll, but also an increased premium because of our experience which is why we're working so hard with the safety training to try to keep those claims to a minimum.
How often does that experience change, that experience rating change?
Annually, it's done on a weighted arrangement where your costs feed into the system for 3 years, and they have a highest year, and then it kind of peters off. So if you have a really high claim year, it sits with you for 3 years in varying degrees of relevance. So it takes several low claim years to deal with that. The issue that we've got is we are stuck in a higher cycle of just a few very expensive claims.
Where are we on the line? Are we approaching low claim years, or are we
No,
kind of smack in the middle?
we're
of the-
smack in the middle of it.
Okay,
We're hoping to have a low claim year. We've got a couple that need to come off soon, that should come off soon. Which is why it's lovely to come in and get the work done, but a lot of time and effort needs to go into kind of developing and maintaining that safety culture, because
as it goes.
and then finally, general assistance, we're all required to have general assistance. It's a statutory requirement. The town is reimbursed for 70% of all of the allowed expenditures. The only thing that is in this budget line would be the allowed expenditures. And then if there's something that doesn't meet the exact criteria for the general assistance program, we would look at other resources. The budget is $14,050 and covers a variety of assistance, heat, food, rent, personal, burial, babies, utilities, all governed by the ordinance that you've passed and your annual adoption of the appendices that set the guidelines. Questions on general assistance? Debt. So overall, our debt is up or is down $3,118. This does include the first payment on the fire engine lease, even though the fire engine is still in line to be built. But we still owe the first year there. I don't know what questions you might have with debt.
Which choice on that?
No, we made a promise, I suppose. And then other used to contain things that we have moved into council and town manager's budget or finance budget. Now is just the county tax and the education appropriation. Which I think we've already talked about.
Questions? So we have a few minutes before Councilor Wingard has to leave, and he's gonna lead the charge.
Thank you, Sarah.
Any additional information that council members need from the manager? Our next gathering is Monday.
So what's important about Monday is Monday will give me the information that I need to build the presentation for the public hearing, unless somebody else would like to do that.
You're so good at it, though.
So it is most of the time, well, in the other budgets that I have done for the town, what gets presented at the public hearing is the council's planned budget. This is what you're saying to the world. this is what we want to adopt, plan to adopt. This is your opportunity to tell us what you think about it, which is why we take a hiatus for a week and don't do budget and then come back the next week to adopt the budget, so that you have in that week the opportunity to consider whatever comments you receive during the budget hearing. But it would be important to kind of have the framework of what it is you want to do, because if we take a budget to public hearing that has a whole bunch of, essentially, if you take this budget to public hearing as it is right now and don't get a ton of comments, which we don't normally get a ton of comments, and then come back and say, gee, I really think I want to cut the pool and hours at the town office and these capital expenditures, that really flies in the face of what the public hearing is about. And I think would open the council up to incredible criticism. If you took what you think is you'd like to adopt, and then hear from the community concerns about budget lines, then I think it's being responsive. But I haven't really gotten a lot of feedback on the budget. And so I am just a little bit nervous as your voice next Monday, in 2 weeks, to take this. So I hope on Monday we can come up with some kind of definition of what's going to move forward.
I only have one, so what I'm thinking is based on what we have talked about today with our new budget summary and comparative tax rate, that the municipal tax rate of 10.08 is going to be less.
Yes.
Okay, and that the projected tax rate, I've got 24.56, which is an 80-cent difference as opposed to $1.24. Okay.
So for our meeting Monday, will you do another one of those summary sheets? Yes, that sheet that reflects, unless there is disagreement on the council, I don't sense there is, using the ARPA funds as has been outlined, moving those items from the budget.
So I'm going to create a new separate budget line, much like what we did with the infrastructure reserve funds. So you'll adopt an ARPA ordinance that will outline what you would spend the money for. Not an ordinance, an order. I was writing, so I assume everybody was fine.
And that order that you're talking about is also subject to change, right, and flexibility during the year. If we have special projects for ARPA funds during the year that we want to introduce, okay.
Yeah, it's the same as the infrastructure account. When
Okay.
we put projects, you do orders that create the infrastructure budget.
So I heard one request for additional information from Sonia, which you've gotten. Are there any other requests for any additional information for Monday's meeting? Because Monday, we would like to finalize what's going to go to public hearing.
So I continue to struggle with this 11%. It's down to 11.5 now. And I know you verbalized the last 3 meetings. Speak now, and I'm not sure what the ask is. I guess for me, I still have a hard time selling that, and I'd like to see a typical, the average has been about a 4.5%. We're at 11. I'd like to see some, what would the impact to service be for us to get to cut that in?
Just the operating expense or the total municipal expenses?
Operating for me is kind of key because it's the gift that keeps giving. That said, you took that amount and used it across the, and found it across the budget, I think that would be worth consideration as well.
So I just want to make sure I understand. I'm not trying to give you any pushback at
Give me
all.
all the pushback you want.
No, it's not my job to give you pushback, Leo. You're looking for me to cut $479,833 out of this budget. Tell you what that would look like.
Not cut, but the proposed area.
Yeah.
Yeah, to
Yeah,
show.
just to
Proposed
show what-
options
how
for
that impacts.
how we could economize and what those options for different types of economizing might look like. And it kind of goes back, I think, to the question Megan was posing philosophically earlier about like, yeah, there are real trade-offs. And so what is it that we, as a group of people tasked with holding these trade-offs and making hard decisions about them, you know? Is it the $250,000 front-end loader and some reduction to snow plowing? Or is it the pool? Or like what collectively do we think might be worth taking a second look at in the name of what would it look like to have a less of a budget increase, which isn't to say that we need to do any or all of those things, but I think it would be wonderful to see a couple of options. So I would second Leo's request.
Other question.
To be clear, I'm not for cutting the pool. I love the pool.
So to be clear, if you ask me for what makes sense, the pool is gonna be on that list.
I'm sure it is, and I.
Your amenity.
You need the $80,000.
Well, that doesn't do anything to your
Yeah.
bottom line because we just funded it with ARPA money.
But the $30,000 a year we spend on the pool, that's entirely just a luxury amenity for the town that does not bring back money.
So if you have specific things you want me to price out taking, then I'm happy to do that. But if you're asking me from what is best for the organization's standpoint to carve out in 1 year this amount of money, I will tell you right off the bat, without direction, the market increase is not going to be one of them. Because I think that's critical to keeping our employees and being able to bring new employees in.
Personally, I would like to see your take on this. And the reason that I say that is not because I believe that, and much of that can be accomplished. Because I look at this budget and I see funding the things that people are expecting to have and that we also need in a lot of instances that we need in order to operate, period. And there are so many increases that are out of our control that are reflected in this budget. So I feel like the budget we end up with is going to be very close to the budget we're looking at now, and there's not a lot we can do about that. However, I would like to see as a thought experiment, the apocalyptic slashing of $500,000 that where you would say that it makes the most sense, because I think it's a useful exercise for us and for the public to see what kind of town that would be. And I think it would be something that many people would not be happy about, but I think it's a great thought experiment to go through. Let's put that.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great thought experiment. And I also think it's like an interesting thought experiment to think about what if we, instead of putting so many of our priorities around what is complaints driven, so like fixing potholes, because that's a thing that people complain about. What if we prioritize investing in the things that we celebrate and that we feel make our town a wonderful place to live in? And that might be like, you know, the new soccer programs, or I guess it was basketball programs, but supporting that while maybe our lawns are mowed less perfectly. And I realize this is a lot of thought experiments to throw at you in a week, but these are some of the things that are occurring.
So let me be clear, it's not a week, it's
Okay.
5 days.
Mhm.
And that's a weekend, which I get, it's my job. But let me also be clear that if you're asking me for my professional opinion, potholes are not complaint driven.
Mhm.
Legally, by statute, we're required to fill it. So I I can do here are the places that we could cut and still meet standard. You're not gonna like them because the soccer program, the $10,000 to finally be able to have some space to play basketball, they're going to go. The library is probably not gonna be open as much as it is now. That $250,000 loader that you keep questioning, which as a counselor, you have every right to do that, and you're entitled to your opinion. But from my perspective, as a manager, knowing the breadth of operation that needs to happen, putting a ton more every hour, driving other equipment harder to deal with a loader that pretty soon I'm not gonna be able to put people in because it is rusting out, is not a sustainable, rational asset management approach. So I can't flip my head like that. And I am not trying to criticize where you want to go. And as a town council, you have every right to decide to prioritize the new soccer program or the indoor. But if you're asking me for my opinion, it's going to be based on fiduciary, sound asset management, taking legal responsibility. It's gonna be based on the dry stuff that nobody likes. And I don't know how to unbase it that way unless you tell me specifically what you're looking for. I want to do what you guys want, but if you're gonna take me outside of what is sound municipal practice, which you can, I need more direction because my mind is not gonna work that
Noted.
Okay,
way. Yes,
are we clear what we're doing?
yes.
I
I
think,
think
and thank you for expressing it honestly, some of your thinking around this. It is helpful to hear.
Is there any more business to come before the group?
I'm very hungry.
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm always hungry though, so it's like.
All right,
Ready to
y'all.
adjourn? Have a motion to adjourn, please.
I will second.
I don't know. You
Oh,
know,
you're
I'm
the
there, Leo.
much moved, so I'm gonna say it was you, Leo. I am in favor.
all in favor?
Don't know what is for dinner, but.
Thank you, Belle.
Kind of feel like a 12-hour day.
Right now.
Not even a 12-hour day, I went to the gym.